Welcome to In the Envelope, an awards podcast. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage. I'm here to give you a front row seat to the Emmys, Oscars, SAG, and Tonys races. Who is in the running? What makes an award-worthy performance? And what are the secrets to giving one? These intimate, inspirational conversations with some of today's most talented stars provide you, dear listener, the kind of craft and career advice that could win you a statue of your own, and maybe, just maybe, a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
Don't beat yourself up that you didn't get it. Like, somebody went in there and it was just perfect for them.
Yeah.
And it worked out that day. And it's going to be great when you go in a room and you're fucking perfect for it. And it all works out. And because it was your job, you know?
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, you can let it go. It wasn't your job.
This reminds me of when we did that little video series.
Oh, God.
When we're, like, on the spot and you're uncomfortable, and so am I.
But I hate being on camera.
Yeah. Well, that's why. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Talking I can do.
You know the podcast.
Yes, I do know the podcast.
Elise, who are you? Elise Roth. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, that's how you pronounce it.
Tell us, very briefly, tell us a little bit about what you do at Backstage.
I am a senior editor at Backstage, and I primarily cover everything that has to do with casting, which is a lot of things because Backstage is a casting platform.
Yes, indeed.
On the site, you probably have seen my name most associated with casting director interviews from across the industry.
Love it.
And otherwise, lots of news. I edit all of our casting roundups and our casting news stories, and
you're letting readers know who's got cast in what.
And what is casting right now on Backstage that our users can apply to.
Amazing.
And helping people get insight on what casting directors want to see.
Totally. Elise's work is wonderful, and she really covers a lot of, a ton, like the list of casting directors that you've interviewed is very long. The list of casting interviews out there is longer, but at some point you will have interviewed everyone.
I mean, everyone is an ambitious assignment, but a lot of people.
Sure. Yeah.
When it comes to a list of award-nominated movies or TV shows, I would say most of the list is covered.
Yeah, most of the big, prominent, prestige-y stuff.
Yeah.
Which is why you're here, because today's episode of In the Envelope, we have Timothy Simons on the podcast today.
So great.
He plays Jonah on Veep, Jonah Ryan. And Veep is about to launch its last season. Pop quiz, because you are the queen of casting. Who casts Veep?
Allison Jones.
Ah! You didn't even pause.
Yeah.
You just know.
Well, she was the original casting. I don't know. I actually am not sure if she continues to cast, but she did the original casting.
What else did she cast?
Superbad, Freaks and Geeks.
Oh, like that whole... Oh,
yeah, original casting on The Office, original casting on Parks and Rec.
Oh, right.
The Good Place. She and Mike Schur work together a lot.
Oh, okay. That's good to know, because Timothy mentions Allison Jones, and he mentions, like, he tells the whole story of how he got cast on Veep, which is awesome. In fact, he tells the story of, like, how he met Allison and how he was in his struggling actor days in Chicago and then in LA, and, like, Veep was obviously his first huge role. And he even said, like, there's no way in hell I ever imagined I would be on A, HBO, B, Armando Iannucci, and C, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And he got all three. And he got that gig.
Yeah.
And he gets into it. And I really like the stuff where you'll hear he talks about the anxiety of being on set for the first time, which, as we know, is always really great to hear.
Yeah. I imagine that there's a lot of preparation when you're an actor for doing the job and for auditioning, but there's that weird in-between time when just the technical aspect of where do you go, what do you do when you're not actually doing the work, that can be really intimidating.
Totally. Let alone the craft stuff of, like, the how to finesse a joke and how to make a joke as funny as it is on Veep, and, like, which isn't actually a jokey show, I would say.
Right. And then there's the added complication of improv, and you're working with all these people who are amazing, which I'm sure is really helpful when you're new or starting out, or it's one of your
Yes.
first big roles, but it's also you have to keep up.
Yeah. The Veep, what people may not know about Veep is that they have a long rehearsal process for each and every episode because it is almost like an improv troupe, or Timothy was saying more like a collaborative theater group, where like a lot of the cast have backgrounds in theater and ensemble work. It's very much an ensemble show. Julia Louis-Dreyfus plays Selena Meyer. For those who don't know, Vice President Selena Meyer. She's broken how many Emmy records? She's broken Emmy records for playing this role. Yeah,
because the first one was for being the lead. For winning an Emmy for being the lead in three separate shows. And
no one's done that in that category.
A certain amount in a row, and then a certain amount in general.
Yeah, totally. And she has now the most of any actress that's competitive, I think. And same is true for SAG. I think she has the most SAG awards of any individual actor.
Well,
it's insane.
She deserves it.
She really does. What else do I need to mention here in my notes is that obviously Armando Iannucci, he's the writer and creator. He's like a legend in England. What I need to mention is that this is a very profane episode of In the Envelope.
Oh. Well, I guess that goes along with Veep.
Exactly, right? If anyone who's seen Veep knows, it's very candid and unedited. I would say even unvarnished. This is actually feels like kind of a different, well, not different, but we really got into it. Every word out of Timothy's mouth was so insightful, and he's such a nice person. However, he's as foul-mouthed as he is big-hearted.
Did he say Julia Louis-Dreyfus recently in an interview said that in real life now she uses swear words all the time because she's carried that over from working on Veep for so long?
Sure.
Was that the case with him?
I think so, yeah. And it's such an interesting time to talk to anyone from Veep because it's closing. So everyone's like bummed and sad.
Yeah.
And you can tell like the effects of that are definitely affecting him. However, he's also developing a new comedy that he's writing and producing called Exit Plans. It is an assisted suicide comedy.
That's exciting. But also,
doesn't that sound great?
I'm very interested to see how that is made into a comedy.
Exactly, yeah. And he finishes this interview with some really great like writing advice, and as always, the just like evergreen acting advice and audition advice is definitely there. There's also a tangent about a cake plate.
Oh.
So if you've been looking for really random tangents with like way too much context, you've come to the right place. Elise, thank you for joining me as my guest co-host. Every time I say guest co-host now, I want to say ghost co-host, but you're alive.
I'm happy to be either or both.
Okay. I just dragged you into this conference room, and now we should get to our lovely interview with Tim Simons.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, you're welcome. This podcast is brought to you by Backstage, the world's #1 casting platform. Listen, a lot of the guests on In the Envelope, an awards podcast, used Backstage at the beginning of their careers. It's how they are now in the running for Emmy, for Oscar, for Tony, etc. If you are at the beginning of your career as an artist, here's what you do. You go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free 30-day trial. That's right, free 30-day trial if you go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE. All you got to do then is make a profile, upload a headshot, and start applying to jobs, to the thousands of casting notices that are uploaded every day, which you can filter online to match your specific talents, your specific needs, your specific looks. Get that dream started today. Check out that free 30-day trial, backstage.com/subscribe, enter the code ENVELOPE. Let's do it. Timothy Simons is a 3-time SAG Ensemble Award nominee and 1-time winner for bringing to life the god-awful Jonah Ryan in HBO's political comedy Veep, created by Armando Iannucci and starring Julia Louis-Dreyfus. As Veep launches its final season, Tim is also working with HBO to write, executive produce, and star in the assisted suicide comedy Exit Plans. Here it is, our interview with the wonderful Timothy Simons.
There's always this learning curve of talking again.
Oh, the actual talking.
The actual talking.
That's great.
Of like,
are we ready?
You forget. Oh, should I move this closer?
No, you're good. Yeah, I've got you all set as you are.
Oh, okay.
Unless you prefer it. Yeah, you can still swing these around too. So yeah, this will still move a little if you prefer.
Okay.
This is a great mic setup. Sometimes the mic is in the face and sometimes
I try to
I
get it to the side. So you
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
So yeah, if you need to move around, and I'll just adjust your levels.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Enjoy your show.
Just the amount of talking that you have to do. And then I struggle with trying to put too much information into sentences that don't need that much information. Or here's all of the context for what I'm about to say, including my childhood. Like it's
that's what we want, though.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna be all about that.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
More context, the better for this podcast, I think.
Right, that sounds great. But like yesterday, I was doing an interview. Yesterday where they were just asking questions about Julia.
Oh,
because it's a Julia-centric article, but they were interviewing some of us about her. And I kept just like not following a line of logic. And I found myself stopping in the middle of sentences and being like, what I just said doesn't make sense. I'm going to start over. Like I'm still sort of like getting into this thing.
It's getting back on a bicycle or something.
Yes. Yeah.
There is a skill, right? To interviewing or to being interviewed. Right?
There is, yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like it going
totally.
Like Tony Hale would always talk about it, like red carpets, like red carpet stuff. Like there is a skill to that. And I remember the first time I was ever on a red carpet or whatever, they asked me a question. And I was like, wow, I really thought about it. Like, wow, that is okay. Well, I have to consider these aspects. And I gave this sort of long, rambling answer. Yeah. And you can see them glazing over. And Tony was like, what they really want is for you to be like, isn't this so fun?
Totally.
Like they want one thing in and out. They can cut it into like a whip pan over to you on the thing.
Right.
And then they get out.
Maybe something kind of shallow too. Just something surface level, like observational. Yeah. Yeah, that's so funny. I've always wondered about that in terms of like, there's a performance aspect, especially, I mean, red carpet is different from like this intimate podcast, for example. But like, there's an act, like there's an act of like, I'm going to play a character who's really good at talking on the red carpet, right? Maybe?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And it is a skill.
I don't know how anybody, I mean, like, I'm speaking very specifically about one thing. Or sorry, I will say any woman, because it's always women that have to do this. When they have to do that, like over the shoulder pose on red carpets, I don't know how anybody has the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
Because I look at that and they are all so uncomfortable already. And then, but all I have to do is I put one hand in my pocket and I let the other arm hang down, and you kind of put one leg a little bit in front of the other, and that's fucking it. That's all I have to do.
Sure.
Nobody cares. But there's all this shit that women have to do on red carpets that just heightens.
Depends on the outfit, the dress.
The dress. They always need to do the sort of sultry over the shoulder thing.
Yeah.
What a nightmare.
That's a nightmare. That's actually really good advice on like how to navigate the red carpet. Like, where did you learn the like has to be one hand in the pocket and the legs just so?
Can I say something that is not? What's the word when it's like a one-word sum up of that you're somebody that's not down to earth? What's that thing?
Oh.
It's not identifiable. That's not the word.
Where someone's not down to earth?
It's not authentic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, whatever that word is, I learned it from my stylist. Like that's where I learned it.
Oh.
So I have a stylist that
Is it like relatable? Genuine?
Relatable. This is the least relatable thing I could ever say.
Yeah.
But I learned that, you learn that from your stylist. Gotcha. Your stylist tells you this is how you stand. I work with a menswear stylist. Yeah. That's what she does, and that's the only thing she does.
And she actually trained you, essentially, to do that.
Yeah.
Was it like a crash course?
No.
Weeks of training?
No, it literally was her on the way out the door being like, by the way, one hand in your pocket. All right, this arm over to the side, one leg in front of the other. There you go. And then whatever face you want to make, that's just up to me.
That part's up to you.
That part's up to me.
None of the rest of it's up to you.
I've found that they always want you to smile really big, but my face just looks weird when I smile really big, so I try not to.
Yeah.
I tried to do the little sort of closed mouth smirk. I don't know.
I really can't pull that off. The closed mouth thing, I always end up looking like I'm pissed.
That's man, I would take that.
And instead you gotta be like
that's a nightmare.
Giant smile, like teeth out. I'm still figuring. I'm glad I'm not photographed all the time.
Oh, it's awful.
This is why I run a podcast, because I'm thinking about these things. I can't wait to. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
So we're with Backstage. Do you know Backstage? Did you ever use us for casting?
Oh, yeah,
purposes?
absolutely.
Did you?
I was just on the cusp of everything kind of turning digital. So I kind of like was sort of when I was coming up, I was half in, half out. So when I moved to Chicago, obviously like all the listings and Backstage for auditions and everything. And there was also just like the tactile nature of you went to Backstage. There was one other thing. There was Performing in Chicago, which was like a performing arts newspaper or newsletter. I don't even know if you could call it a newspaper.
Sure.
But that was a big thing. They would list auditions in that. There was also, I think if you came up in Chicago in that time, there was a book called The Book. And you showed up in Chicago and everybody was like, read the book. And it ran you through all of like what it was like to be in Chicago theater.
Sure.
So anyway, it's sort of like Backstage is like a big part of like kind of coming up in theater or whatever.
And you would circle like, what did you look for? What kind of auditions?
I look for?
Yeah.
Oh, I was always... I mean, if it said, like, you need to be a singer, I would just be like, fucking X that out. Like, I never was, nor have I ever been a singer. Pardon me real quick. I have to do, I wear hearing aids, and they're controlled through an app on my God. Phone.
That's amazing.
So I was just not very rudely checking my phone while we were talking.
That's okay. That's okay.
No, so I would if it said coming up, the only thing I wanted to do was like weird sort of off loop storefront-y straight plays. That's what I wanted to do. So that's sort of the stuff that I looked for. I kind of looked at the companies that did that sort of work. Yeah. And I would, that's the kind of stuff that I looked for.
That's, the storefront stuff. And Chicago is the place for those kinds of, it sounds like that genre thrives there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I got to hear the whole story because we can totally get into the whole life story. Because, like, we're always on this podcast, we're interested in, when did you get bit by the bug? If you got bit by the acting bug and why? And I always like asking, like, why acting? Why the arts?
I mean, there's always like the deep, like I make this joke with Julia a lot, like whenever, that like one of the biggest reasons is that there is no bottom for the amount of attention, positive or negative, that I need. There's that.
Okay.
So you just kind of start there.
Yeah, start there.
And then you throw in a little middle child.
Oh, okay.
You throw in a little middle child, sort of like class clowny, performative, wanting everybody to be okay and happy, kind of middle child stuff. Yeah. And you just throw that in the hopper for 18 years. And then I started when I think I did some plays in high school, but I wasn't into it.
Okay.
Like a family friend was directing the shows, a teacher, like a young teacher who had just graduated from college, had started teaching German at our high school, and he also directed the plays, and he was great. His name is Peter Duffy, and we still keep in touch. Like, he's still a family friend. He teaches theater and performing arts at a college in South Carolina, I think, at the University of South Carolina.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I believe so.
Crazy.
Which actually, that's an odd segue into the fact that I was also the kind of like class clowny asshole in high school who would wear like those hats that had like the mascot name on them, were very popular.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And the South Carolina one just said Cox.
Oh.
Because they're the Gamecocks.
Okay.
And so it was like a thing.
Sure.
Man, like I wore that Cox hat around.
Yeah.
And of course, if like my teachers were like, "We know what you're doing," and I was like, "Oh, you don't know what I'm doing." Like, what a dick! What a dick!
What a dick!
I would do it again in a hearteach.
I know, it's like it's a good joke. It's a good joke that you wear in your head.
Joke.
Yeah, yeah.
And so anyway, he's teaching there now. He's teaching in South Carolina, I think. But we keep in touch. I'll Skype into his class every once in a while. Like, they'll ask questions of like, how did you get started? Like all that kind of stuff.
There you go.
And you know what? I would say, no, I'm mixing stories together.
Okay.
I Skyped back into my high school's Teen Issues Week one time.
Oh, teen issues.
I went to like a progressive high school, despite what I'm saying about this Cox hat joke.
Sure.
And that they all kind of clutched their pearls about that. I went to a pretty progressive high school in rural Maine. And they had this whole week that was sort of dedicated to hearing, like sort of bringing in voices about the things that teens were going through. And a lot of them were, I mean, there were people that came in, like at the time, I mean, it seems so antiquated now, but at the time, like, you know, coming out to your parents as a 15-year-old or something like that was sort of like just becoming, so they would have kids from other schools come in and talk
as
about
a teen issue.
As a teen issue.
Yeah,
like
gotcha.
maybe somebody at this school is struggling because they don't know if they can come out to their parents. So like it was like a support system. Cool. Transgendered issues came up in this. I mean, it's like they were sort of ahead of their time in that regard. There was one guy that came in and did a thing called the Dance of Addiction. No. And it was about, he was sober and he had been a heroin addict. Okay. And I am laughing.
We're laughing, but
I am laughing and I feel terrible, but it was very funny. And he did this whole dance, this whole interpretive modern dance about him descending into heroin addiction in front of a bunch of 8th graders.
Oh, no.
And during this Teen Issues Week, it's still the funniest thing I've ever seen. At one point, he was pretending to stab himself in the arm, and he was screaming, "I can't even get high anymore." And like, look, this man has had a much worse life than mine. And I can't believe that just some shit-heel kid wearing a Cox hat would even dare to make fun of somebody who went through that. But anyway, it was that kind of week.
That's, wow.
It was Teen Issues.
I mean, you're never going to forget that.
No.
There's how you think about drug addiction right there.
Yeah.
For life.
Honestly, that's the reason you shouldn't do drugs, is because eventually you'll do fucking modern interpretive dance. It's the only reason. So I Skyped into a Teen Issues Week one time.
Yeah. To talk about what issues?
Oh, I think this was just kind of like, I don't know what the issue was.
As an alum, maybe? Yeah.
I think as an alum, I was probably some filler. Like, are you interested in performing arts? Like, well, we got this guy to Skype in and you can ask him questions.
Okay. Yeah.
And the first question in both classes, after I'd done the whole spiel about how I got started and what's it like on set, and how does it feel and where do you live and all that, the first question in both classes was, do you know Zac Efron?
What?
I think Zac Efron.
Both times?
Both times,
what?
both classes. I think he is massively popular in a way that I don't fully understand. Like,
right.
I think he's an incredibly talented guy.
Sure. Oh yeah.
But the fact that it was the only thing, like it was,
they're just sitting there waiting to ask that question.
Yes, this was not a passive question.
What?
This was, I am sitting up straight in my chair. I have raised my hand with authority to make sure that I am the first. And do you know Zac Efron? Included in the subtext of that is, can I meet Zac Efron?
It's about access. Yeah.
Remember how I said earlier that I'm getting used to talking and I'm kind of going on tangents?
Yes. Yeah, I love it.
So this is all to answer the question, how did I get bit by the bug?
Yeah.
God
this
damn.
Is perfect.
I started in... I got bit by the bug in college, my first year of college. Oh. And... my sister, I had a really sort of rough freshman year at school, and I just honestly, it just comes down to, I was really having trouble making friends. I didn't find any like-minded people, and I saw a thing. So I had been in some plays in high school, but didn't identify as somebody that wanted to be an actor at all. I auditioned for some 10-minute plays, and they went well, and I got cast in 2 or 3 of them. Okay. And it was really fun, and it was something to throw yourself into. And this has sort of been a recurring theme in my life, that I am somebody that I do think thrives in an ensemble-based atmosphere that. And so I immediately recognized, and I think this was also the acting teacher at the school where I went, which is certainly not like an acting school by any means, or at least not acting forward. I went to the University of Maine. We are very well known for our forestry program.
Oh, okay.
But the acting program, not so internationally renowned.
Sure. But enough to set you on this path.
Huh?
But it was enough to set you on the path
Yeah.
of like
Those
10-minute plays.
Those 10-minute plays. And then the next semester, like they were called, they were the upper dogs and the underdogs. The underdogs were those were the 10-minute plays.
Oh.
And so that was like the directing class would direct those 10-minute plays.
Okay.
And then the upper level directing class, the upper dogs, was the 30-minute plays.
Oh, okay.
And so I
legit.
auditioned for some of those, and I met this guy. I met this guy Claude, who was like a really brash and funny Canadian guy from Vancouver. I think he's from Vancouver Island, and he just, he's one of those guys that like. He just knew all these fucked up Canadian plays, and like there was this thing of like I liked Shakespeare growing up. Like my family, there was a Shakespeare theater in Maine that we would go to in the summer, and I loved it. I loved it, but I never felt like a much of a call to perform it.
Sure.
So when I actually sort of found these like sort of weird,
more modern
plays, I really connected with those,
good.
and I found the experience of like sort of both seeing them, both being in an audience for them and being a part of them, I thought was really fun. So that's sort of when I caught the bug.
Gotcha.
And by the that was my freshman year. By the next fall, like I had switched majors and I was just sort of all in. But again, it goes back to bottomless need for attention, positive or negative. They had gone well. Like these plays the plays that I was in had gone well, and a lot of people in the department had seen them, and then I was receiving feedback that was like, hey, you're okay at this, you should continue this. And I was like, I will do anything to continue getting that, to get more of that.
Yeah. It's almost like you now have to do an interpretive dance about your addiction to acting.
I'm going to go ahead and say that that's absolute. An addiction to acting is the worst than that fucking heroin addiction.
Yeah. I mean, on this podcast, we want to celebrate addictions to acting, I guess. Like, I do think that the bottomless need for attention, it can be a negative thing, sure, but it can be a positive.
It can. You gotta learn how to balance it. You gotta learn how to balance it, but it's there. Like, it also is like, eventually you sort of come to the realization of like, oh shit, like I'm just a modern circus person, and like, you gotta perform
and be okay with that.
Yeah, you gotta be okay with that. Yeah. And you gotta,
And but the bottomless need for attention thing is also like, doesn't have to coincide with being selfish. Or
no, absolutely.
Dick.
Yeah.
Like it could, but you don't have to choose to be a dick.
You don't have to choose to be a dick. Yeah. You can get attention, and you can do good work, and you can get attention without being a total cock.
Right. Without being a cock.
With your fucking hat.
Well, and it sounds like that was almost just being an asshole in high school was like prep for Jonah. Is it safe to say?
Yeah, I feel like he's a guy that the problem with what I'm about to say is that both of my kids, definitely my son, are both doing this thing, which is that I think I'm not a charmer, but I was charming enough when growing up to get away with a lot of shit. And so I don't think I was an asshole. I think I kind of did assholey things, but I was charming enough.
That. Yeah.
They were never mean spirited.
Yeah.
And so I think I pushed every single boundary that I could, and I certainly found whatever was over the line. I was like, okay, well, there it is. And now I know how to go right up to it. And my own children, I'm now getting this sort of divine payback with my own children because they are fucking... And my son, same kind of thing. Yeah. He has a great smile. Like, that kid has a fucking great smile, and he is a warm
and he's gonna use it.
Loving and smart kid, and he will fucking push every boundary. So I think the differences between sort of like this assholey behavior and that Jonah has and the assholey behavior that I had is that I certainly don't want to say on my side that it was that it was all warmly received or that it was all charming. But I think the majority of it landed on the right side of people.
Sure.
Whereas his,
yeah,
I tried to just do all the things that I would do, but I just took any grace and charm.
Oh
out of them.
yeah. Oh, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. It's your types of like teenage behavior, but with the malicious intent. So, I mean, he's not always malicious, but like. Yeah, the remorseless.
It is remorseless.
Everyone on that show is pretty remorseless.
They're pretty remorseless.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. I think
totally.
to the credit of everybody that performs on that show and everybody that writes on that show, the fact that the show has been on this long, and you still like those characters.
Oh, sure.
They are awful people.
Oh, yeah.
They're
They're the worst people on TV.
Yes,
I think.
they are the worst people on television, and yet you walk away, and like a lot of it is credit to Julia. She has a way of doing that, like the worst person, and you're still like, but I kind of like her.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally rooting for her. Yeah. Even though, I guess on paper, if you read the scripts, you're like, they're horrible. Yeah. But then the performances, I'm just like, but. Yeah, I want to hang out with these people. From afar, I want to hang out with these people.
You don't ever want to meet them in real life. You're at a safe distance from them. Yeah.
We always love hearing about I wrote down something like, I wrote JLD, working with ensemble of geniuses, as if that's like a question for you. But like, I love that in college, part of the biting of the bug, the acting bug, was the ensemble nature and the idea of like, the greater than the sum of your parts almost. Yeah. And acting is such an art form that it's hard to kind of quantify what that is and how that works. But I mean, I find it fascinating.
Yeah. I've always been, I feel like I've been pretty lucky in that just about every level that I've ever worked in, or at least that I've ever had any success in, there was always, basically what I'm saying is I feel like I've been very lucky in my life that I have had a bunch of really, like the ensembles of people that I've been around, like sort of professionally, or when you're just talking about like the Chicago theater community, sort of at large, that like the ensemble nature of those communities that I've sort of been through. I've been very lucky with how well those have operated, but again, I think it goes back to this thing. Like, I do think that I've generally been most successful, and I think a lot of it does have to do just with the idea of just kind of these people sort of like they have your back. You feel supported by that, and so when it comes to like the ensemble of working with this show, and like we do have a lot of a lot of people in the show have theater backgrounds. Yeah. But even the ones that don't are all full on board for this idea of ensemble. So when we came in, it was my first big job of any, like my first big job. So I was terrified and nervous. But it just started from the top down. It just started from the top down with Julia and Armando, that it was like a very welcoming and supportive environment in like the rehearsal rooms as we were rehearsing for the pilot, that allowed you, that not only told everybody in the room that their input was valued, but that also if you pitched a joke that just sucked, it wasn't going to be the thing that was going to be like, all right, well, that's not going to ruin it. You pitched a bad joke. You tried a thing and it didn't work at all. Right. You really forced that one. And it wasn't just like a write-off. It was, we are building this thing together. We are creating and finding this thing together. And like the rising tide of that is going to lift all the boats.
Yeah, it sounds like that was very much intentionally, like a conscious effort to build an ensemble atmosphere.
I think so. I mean, I think it was... Number one, just by the nature of how we made the show in the beginning, it had to be. Otherwise, like, because we, it's been sort of well documented, the rehearsal process that we had, but which not only was like, I think we rehearsed for like 3 days. Yeah, we probably rehearsed 3 days, just like in the meeting room at a Baltimore Hilton, like just like a conference room. Where we would read the scenes and then we put them to the side and then we kind of run through ideas. And it was all very unfamiliar for, I think, everybody in that ensemble, and very uncomfortable for everybody because nobody was really used to it. I didn't know any better. I was still very uncomfortable, but I had nothing to compare or contrast it to.
Sure.
But then once we got picked up, and once we were going to shoot the first season, they had scripts 2 through 5, I think, and we went to London and rehearsed those for 2 weeks, just in the middle of the summer, 2 months before we were gonna. And the idea was we did table reads, and then we put scripts to the side, and then we'd run through scenes, and we would play reporters, and we would play somebody would play the ice cream, like the grandmother who owns the frozen yogurt shop, and somebody would play the guy.
Yeah.
And you just try to put Julia in an uncomfortable situation and see what happens. Or it's like the scene isn't working. What it needs like this conflict. Our podcast listeners can't see what's happening, but sort of like fitting 2 pieces together. He would make this little thing with his hands where he'd be like, it's not working. Like that. Yeah. That sort of thing.
And then you work together to figure it out.
We all work together.
It's like a puzzle that you got to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody would be in the room, even if you weren't working on your scenes. You would be in the room.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And you'd play reporters.
That's so cool.
You'd be like at one time, like maybe Matt wasn't able to be there one day. You'd end up playing Mike.
Yeah.
Trying to pitch bits for him, Huh. So it was like very much like a communal.
Cool. And very theatery, very like an improv troupe.
Honestly, it felt more like workshopping a new play than it did feel like improv. Because even, I think one of the things that made it the most uncomfortable is that you are put up in front of an audience because you are standing up in front of writers. You're standing up in front of the people that are running your show and writing the scripts. And to do that rehearsal process was about finding funny stuff, but it was also trying to find like just sort of human natural reactions that would come up. So getting laughs wasn't necessarily the right thing. It might work, but it might work to get a laugh, but it might not work to fix the scene.
Okay.
So it was very uncomfortable and fun, but also like every single time you left, you were like, Jesus, I'm fucking terrible at this. We would all leave and go back to our hotel rooms.
Convinced it was trash.
Yeah, we're just trash. We're just absolute garbage. But but yeah, it was much more like workshopping a new play.
Yeah.
Than it was like rehearsing like an improv show where the end goal is we need to like find the quickest way to get to a funny thing.
Yeah.
And here are the steps to do that, and we're going to practice that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like it'd be one thing if you had a studio audience while you were rehearsing to like laugh at your jokes. You might feel less devastated after rehearsals. But like, I love the idea that you're not necessarily going for the laugh. That doesn't solve the scene necessarily.
No, especially with Arm. With Arm and especially like, and Julia's really like in those first years, like, and it's been a very common refrain, especially with Julia, like, up until episode 7 of season 7, like up until our finale episode, like trying to keep making sure the show is kept within the bounds of reality of what would actually happen. And so Frank Rich is one of our producers, and he was always in the rehearsal room a lot, which, it was, I mean, like, and especially because we would have like a lot of actors come down from New York, having Frank Rich in your.
Jesus.
I mean, like, there were a bunch of people that came through that'd be like, wait a minute, that's Frank Rich? Fuck, I was in a show that he closed. Like, that's sort of like.
He closed, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But like the thing about Frank in our circumstances, he's the most fucking wonderful and supporting and amazing. Like, Frank Rich is an absolute mensch of a wonderful human being, and I love him to death. But yeah, it was more about finding little things in the process of it rather than finding the jokes. Yeah. And jokes were part of it. Finding something funny was part of it. But it was more about like the sort of lived in reality of the scenes.
Wonderful. I love hearing stuff like that too, because I've heard it said that sometimes with, I guess it's certain types of comedy, but like you play it deadly seriously. Yeah. And it comes off funny, but to you as the character, you're in dire circumstances, or you're furious, or you're really sad, or like, and you're not playing it with like a budum-tsh.
Right, exactly. And honestly, anything, I mean, anything where the rhythm of a scene sounded too jokey, Arm would change it. He would, like, it sounds too jokey. I think he would just really wanted to avoid it. He wanted to make it feel lived in. And there were times definitely where a sort of jokier rhythm was required for something to work. And it's really like trying to find that sort of perfect balance between this can't feel sitcom-y setup but also there's a comedy rhythm to this bit that that I am not hitting. Finding that thing is really hard.
Yeah, that takes practice.
Yeah.
How did you get involved? What do you remember about those first? Did you audition?
I did,
bunch?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
A bunch?
I remember Tony Ailes is like a really wonderful guy. If anybody ever has the chance to meet him, they'll know that he told me this. We got together for lunch right after I got cast, and I will go back to like how I ended up cast in it. But right after, I think he had like a contractual thing on something else he had to figure out. So the announcement of his being cast on the show was delayed for a little while. But once he was finally announced, we had met the day of the network test. He was in there, and he saw how nervous I was. And he ended up doing a really amazingly nice thing by leaning over and being like, "Hey, just so you know, I see how nervous you are, and like, just think about anything else. Like, I can see you going through it in your head. Just think about anything else. Like, what do you want to talk about?" And I was like, I had like just seen the most recent Harry Potter movie, I think. And I was like, I just saw Harry Potter. And he was like, cool, let's talk about that. And if you know Tony now, he comes like in this story, comes across as like so even and so not like Tony is most obviously is also the most nervous man that I've ever met. So he's like so cool and calm and collected. We talked about Harry Potter and it was great.
Wow.
So I get cast on the show. It's my first thing.
This was unprompted. He leaned over to do this.
Unprompted.
Really?
I think he just saw a man collapsing and decided he was going to step in. And so we got together for lunch, and one of the things that he said was, he was like, it's going to be really funny, like, as you go on in your career, people are going to ask you, like, you know, so, you know, you're in this project. What attracted you to this project? Why this? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, the answer is because they fucking cast me in it. Because I fucking read it and I liked it. And then they were willing to give me money to appear in it. Like, that is, so there is always that thing of like, I just always think that's funny. And like what do you mean? Why this?
Yeah, very few actors that just have their pick of any project.
There are what, 4?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe?
Yeah, if that. They also go through dry spells. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they can't get a job.
Where they can't get a job. Yeah. So fuck.
Yeah.
It's all a nightmare. I think what we're getting at, Backstage podcast listeners, is that this is an absolute shitting nightmare top to bottom.
That's what we want to hear.
So when I was in Chicago, I had found the bare minimum of luck with some on-camera work. I got cast in a Will Ferrell movie that I was cut. The scene that I was in was cut the day of. I think you can still see me in the background, but the scene, they were running long. It had to get cut. I was devastated.
Yeah.
Because, man, I felt cool.
I've heard about that happening for people's first project. It's their scene that's cut. And it sounds brutal.
Yeah, what are you going to do? You're just some guy. You come in, they're like, oh, this is like, there are tens of millions being spent on this production. And like, you know, it was actually like the first time that it's, because this has happened again, like, if it doesn't move the story forward, there's no reason to, and the director came up and he was really nice about it. He was like, I just want to let you know, you really did an amazing, you did an amazing job in your, oh, there it is. He gave me a compliment. That's why I like him. Like, oh, look at this. The trend continues. He was like, you really did an amazing job in your audition, but we're running long. We have a hard out, and this scene does not move the story forward. Wow. And so it's got to go.
And the day of.
This day of. So I had but it was cool. Like, I still got to hang out on set. I was on set with Will Ferrell. I asked him about bands that had come through Saturday Night Live, stuff like that. I was there. I got to feel like I had a trailer, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow. But anyway, I had like a bare minimum of some luck, both sort of like and I'm talking bare minimum of like like with on-camera work.
Yeah.
And so I moved to Los Angeles. I was in Chicago for 6 years, and then eventually I moved to Los Angeles because I found sort of an affinity for the on-camera work. And so I moved out here, and I was just like, I was running casting sessions for commercials, and I ended up then, because of that, I was in one of the person I was working for, a woman named Jenny, who I've seen recently, who is very talented herself, and who you see in commercials a lot. She was working for a casting agency. We loaned her a cake plate for her wedding recently.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations to her on her nuptials. She did return the cake plate, if anybody in the podcast is wondering.
Good.
I think it might actually be a valuable cake plate. I think it's like an antique. I think I saw somebody selling this like kind of shitty cake. I've always looked at it and been like, what is this garbage cake plate? I think it might be like I think it was like a hand-me-down from my wife's family. I think it might actually be pretty valuable. I'm going to sell this fucking cake plate.
You shouldn't lend it to people.
No, we shouldn't. I learned about this after the fact. Yeah. No, I'm going to sell that. I'm going to sell that thing. I'm unemployed now. I got to sell it.
Oh no! Oh no!
So here's another acting tip for everybody. If you find yourself unemployed, sell your cake plates.
These are really good practical tips.
Really good practical tips. Everybody's learning something today. So I got cast. I had like sort of a run of good luck. I had been out here for maybe 2 years.
You were getting cast and stuff?
I commercially, I was having because that's the sort of the world that I was working in. I was running commercial casting sessions. And I had like a great year where I just had like a run of good luck with it, which felt great. It was awesome, and it was cool for like the first time in my life. I was like actually sort of like making a living. Yeah. Doing the thing that I wanted to do sort of consistently. Sure. I still didn't give up that job. I still worked that job day to day. But it was nice to be like, oh, like a check arrived in the mail. That's It's a great feeling.
It's a nice feeling, yeah.
But then one of them, I knew a guy who was working at Allison Jones's, in Allison Jones's office. He was her assistant or associate. I think it was associate. And we had met through friends right when I moved to town. So my friend Tony, who was a server in the place where I attended bar, it was his roommate's friend.
Oh, wow.
So his roommate was Kevin, and Kevin was friends with Peter. But Peter actually represents the woman who plays my wife this year.
Okay.
There's been, so he represents this woman, Emily Pendergast, who is phenomenally fucking funny. So he showed Allison a commercial that I was in, and she was like, oh, I think he's funny. Why don't we bring him in for something? And this was when The Office was still on, and I started going in for like small parts for the shows that they cast. Day player stuff on The Office, shit like that. Yeah. And then this was, I think, like 6 months later. I've been called in like a handful of times for things. I'm like, I never booked any of them.
Sure.
This show came up, and when I got the script for this, and it was like I was called in, it was like a series regular, and I had never auditioned for anything more than like
interesting, like
a guest star. I think I auditioned for some guest stars, but that was like the most.
Even that's big.
Even this was a big jump, and I was just like, well, this is great, cool. She thinks I can do that. She thinks I might be able to do that. So that means I'll get called in for stuff later. Certainly, this one won't work out.
Gotcha. I see.
Like the pedigree of this is
how
such
that works. Yeah.
that it would never work out.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see it as a stepping stone, not necessarily. It never crossed your mind it was going to happen.
No, not at all.
That's amazing.
No, it was like if you look at all three of those things, if it was Armando, it was HBO, and it was Julia. Like those, if one of those things is true,
then it's
I'm
huge.
not getting that job.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
But all three of them were true, so certainly I'm not getting it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then when it happened, I mean, you said that you were really nervous on like the first days, or that you were so uncomfortable. Like, what do you remember about? How did they help you like get into that world and get comfortable?
Yeah, the rehearsal process helped. Like that I was like, it was easy. It was just like we were in a conference room. We were in a hotel conference room. There's no pressure. There's no crew. There's no cameras. There's no lights. It's a very stripped down thing about what you're doing, so you don't have to worry about that part of it. So I was definitely helped by that.
Yeah.
By the rehearsal process. And a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people, it's like, yeah, you're going to rehearse when you get to set.
Yeah.
But even then, like the very first scene that we filmed is the very first scene that I'm going to start that sentence again. The very first scene that I filmed was the very first scene that you see me in the first episode.
So very beginning, yeah.
So the very beginning.
Chronological.
Yeah.
And
I remember on that first take just being so like hyperventilatingly like chest constricting, anxiety laden, nervous, that I was convinced I was going to get fired after lunch. But then when I came back from lunch and I was still employed, I was like, okay, let's change our thinking about this. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, I had to sit down and tell myself this. Our podcast listeners can't see this, but I'm rubbing my eyes at the memory of the fucking how anxious I was. But
yes,
I was like, all right, well, I've never done any of this shit before. I've never been in a giant television show with an American icon directed by an English icon on like a very prestigious television network.
Yeah.
Certainly I've never done that. Frankly, I've never even been close to doing that.
Right.
But I have been in a room and talked to 6 people before.
Okay.
Like that I've definitely done.
Cool.
So that first day, I just tried to focus on that. Like just fucking talk to these other people and see if you can hang on to the end of the day.
Just change it in your head from one thing to another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I suppose is like the whole thing that
acting?
we do. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And I like that it's the hurdle of getting through lunch, like the idea that you came back and you weren't yet fired. Because I think it's really, thank you for sharing these inner thoughts of like the voices in your head that are saying you're going to get fired. Like actors feel that. It's devastating. It feels so personal.
It never goes away.
That possibility of rejection.
Yeah. I mean, the possibility of fucking rejection is always there, and it continues to be. It continues to be to this day. Like, I think that was a big learning experience for me, and for a few things when it comes to the idea of getting fired. Is that number one, you're probably going to get fired someday.
Someday
you're going to get fired off a job. Like Reed, who's fantastic, and Reed, he's been fired off pilots before, and he had this great attitude about it, which was like, yeah, it sucks. Yeah. It sucks when it happens. And then 2 days later, you are so happy it happened. Because if you're getting fired, it doesn't do the show service and it doesn't do you service to leave you in something that you will not be successful in. And that is nice to hear. It's going to fucking suck. It's going to suck if you get fired. I still haven't been in the position where I've been fired off something. I know it's coming, and I'll try to keep that in mind.
That's a great attitude.
It's going to be real shitty the day that it happens, and then it'll ultimately be fine.
Yeah.
The other thing is just that, like, that feeling of the rejection, like the sort of coming rejection, the the audition rooms don't get any easier.
No.
I mean, I will say this. They don't get any easier anxiety-wise. They get a little bit more friendly if you've done something that they've seen and that they've liked. They're definitely there was definitely a change in tenor in the audition rooms that I
haven't
went.
heard.
Yeah. Once the show had come out, once people had seen it, audition rooms definitely change a little bit after that. But you're still going to have just spiraling anxiety leading up to them. I mean, if you're anything like me, then yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. That's priceless backstage advice right there.
Is it?
Yeah, how to just knowing that the anxiety never goes away. And I feel like once you know that it never does, that helps you step in the right direction of well, okay then.
Yeah. I mean, at least the more and more I come around to that, and I feel like I'm almost surprised by it every time. I'm like, wait, why is this happening again? Why do I feel like this is the first time I've ever auditioned? Why do I feel like I'm going to go in there and it's going to be this unfriendly, unfeeling room where I go in and they're just because I've been in those things where you do your 1 minute.
And it's awful.
They're terrible.
Yeah.
I've been in those things that are faceless and nameless, and they don't give a shit if you're there. And it always kind of feels like it's going to be like that. And they do get a little bit more friendly, but...
Yeah.
And here's one thing that this is a little bit further along. Over the last couple seasons, the last 2 years, I've had to sit in on chemistry reads for both the woman who ended up being cast as Shawnee, a woman named Mary Holland, who's massively funny last year.
Yeah.
And I knew Mary from before, from the LA improv community.
Oh, cool.
And then Emily, who plays my wife this year, is somebody who I had never met before. I knew that she worked with Peter, but I only found out that like the day before she came in. That it's a really amazing thing. Like by the time you're getting to like a chemistry read, the actresses both years that came in for those parts, across the board, phenomenally talented people, and there was a learning curve. There was something I learned from those rooms that I have had to take in with me to other rooms, which is the people that came in and they did an incredible job, and they are very talented people. But one person came in and was just sort of perfect for it, and just kind of fit. Like there was nothing you could do in a way like to make it different.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you won't ever get a job, and it doesn't even mean that you were bad that day.
Right.
And same thing with Emily. Like she came in, so that happened with Mary, and it happened with Emily. Once Emily came in, it was like, well, this just
It's a no-brainer.
worked. But like the other people that came in as well,
Totally.
massively talented people. And very recently, like I went on an audition, and it was with a director, and I remember I left being like, I gave a perfectly fine audition. There's nothing wrong with it. There was nothing that like I could point to. It was like, wow, that was just a really bad job acting. It might not have changed the world, but certainly it wasn't like the worst audition you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But I definitely knew walking out that I was going to be like one of the 5 other guys, and there was going to be that 6th guy that came in and was just effortless and fit it, you know? And so, it sucks to not get a job. But also somebody just walked in that day. Yeah. And it was their job.
That's what chemistry is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's another thing, like when it comes to like sort of backstagey things, I think there is that thing, like it sucks to not get jobs, and I've not gotten plenty of them.
Yeah.
None of them were mine.
None of them are yours.
None of them were mine.
Yeah.
Like they were like, I got this one because it was mine. I got like any other thing that I've gotten, I got it because it was mine.
Yeah.
Like, like it. Don't beat yourself up that you didn't get it. Like somebody went in there and it was just perfect for them.
Yeah.
And it worked out that day. And it's going to be great when you go in a room and you're fucking perfect for it. And it all works out. And because it was your job, Yeah. And if it wasn't, you can let it go. It wasn't your job. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'd love asking about the post audition. Like, how do you recover from a crappy audition or from the rejection? And it sounds like that's the mentality. It's like, it's just not your job.
Oh, I will say that I don't ever think about that till like 3 days later after
It takes a couple days.
It takes a couple days. Okay. Yeah. There's also that first little bit of like, there is no recovering from this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's the drug, right? You want to go back for more. Yeah. But you go into withdrawal or whatever.
Yeah. God, you can't even get high anymore.
Kind of works. I want to see the dance. I want to see the interpretive dance.
It was just writhing. He was just writhing on the floor.
Just like different kinds of writhing, or like different writhing throughout, or like the same.
No, the writhing was only during the withdrawals. Like sort of the writhing was the depths of his addiction.
Okay.
Before that, it was almost like there was almost like a flirtation at the beginning. There was a flirtation with the drug of like, oh, well, I'll just try this. I'm very close,
Yeah.
And then as he got sort of closer into it and deeper into it, and once he couldn't get high anymore, that's when the writhing on the floor happened. And he was shirtless and wearing jeans.
Oh, my God. Wow.
I hope he's okay, and I really hope he doesn't listen to this podcast. Or maybe I do, because he has had a huge effect on me and what I think is funny.
Yeah, and what you think is funny and what you think about drug addiction.
And I've definitely never done heroin. So, I mean, who am I to judge his work?
There you go.
Yeah.
He inspired you.
He inspired me.
There you go. Before I can't keep you for much longer, but what can you tell us about season 7? If we are saving this for after it's aired, I suppose you could tell us stuff.
There will still be some stuff that I can't tell you just because of the things.
Yeah. But like, what can we expect?
One thing that I'll say that'll be, I think, because there's no way to separate ourselves from, like, we are like our job is supposed to be that we're a mirror to, that we're some sort of weird funhouse mirror of the world that we live in.
Yes.
Like, if you're going to satirize politics, then you got to satirize the political system you're in. And it was very different. Like, the political environment that we lived in was very different than when this show started.
Yeah.
And one thing, pardon me, can you edit that burp out?
Yeah, I didn't notice there was a burp, but yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
We can edit stuff out, yeah.
Excellent. I want you to leave in the question of me asking.
Yeah, okay.
To edit the
Making
burp out,
note
though.
of it, yep.
So I'll see if maybe there's a way I can sort of end around to make this a backstagey sort of thing.
Sure. Appreciated.
That obviously the president, or current president, is going to affect how a political satire is produced. And I think the last thing that any of us wanted to do was make a bunch of bad Trump jokes. Because if you want bad Trump jokes, if he does something fucking super dumb at 9 a.m., you've had every dumb President Trump joke on Twitter by noon.
Yep.
And then on Saturday Night Live, they do better ones, but then it's burned.
And then it's
like
done. Yeah.
they're done. You don't want us to do those.
No.
I don't think anybody wants anybody. I feel like we all wish we weren't in a position where we would have to make Trump jokes. But I think one thing that I really liked is that as much as we try to incorporate, one thing that I like that season 7 of the show has done is that as much as we have tried to incorporate the current political climate, it was never to the sacrifice of the characters that were there. All of like whatever qualities in either the electorate or the candidate that you might think about, it didn't mean that any of the characters had to do something that wasn't already there. Like we were able to associate these things, and we were able to put them into play without it feeling like all of a sudden characters just changed. And I feel like whenever they got too close, and maybe this is like the backstagey thing, is that like when you're in that position, like if you're an actor in that position, when a show's been on for a long time, like at some point you do also have to think about character protection too. And so part of that was like, if I ever found myself doing something that like, maybe there was a rhythm that was too Trumpian, like if I was doing something where like the Venn diagrams of these attitudes overlapped with something that maybe he is known for, if I ever had like a cadence that sounded too much like him, if I ever had a hand gesture that was too much like his, find a way to bring it back would try to find ways to bring it back to just the character that was already there.
Yeah.
So I think that was something that I think we succeeded in this year of like, bringing these things in without it running roughshod over the production.
Yeah. It's quite a feat to do that acting job, because it's right.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah.
Ooh.
No, the trailer was already. The trailer.
What if by the time you hit like published podcast, you're like, it didn't work?
Veep season 7 sucked. No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen, because really, truly, it has gotten better and better. And I think what you said earlier about it really is because from the ground up they wanted characters who reacted in real ways, or who felt real, who felt honest and authentic, and they were in these maybe bizarre circumstances, but are maybe in their own personal dramas. And that's maybe why they're also sort of likable sometimes.
Yeah, I do think that like Jonah specifically, I do think that the reason if people respond to him a certain way. Like, I really have tried to view him with empathy, if not sympathy.
Okay.
And I think that is important, like to be empathetic to, or empathic. My therapist says empathic, and I don't believe him that that's how that word is pronounced.
Is there a difference between
No, it's the same, but I say empathetic, and he says empathic. And, you know, he's the therapist. He's probably right, but I'm fucking right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I've tried to very much like view the like trying to put him in like through like an empathetic or empathic lens.
Yeah.
But not having sympathy for his actions, not having sympathy for what he does, or being sympathetic to who he is, but being empathetic. And I feel like like people recognize some of this, like trying to put human characteristics into this fucking nightmare of a man, and then it makes them sort of feel for him in a way that they don't want to.
Okay.
And then this has been another important thing for me, just because this is also something that I like as a viewer. I don't like it when sort of reprehensible characters are let off the hook too much.
Yeah.
And I really have always been a big proponent of whenever he makes you feel, or whenever any of these characters, but because it's me, I'll speak specifically to Jonah. Whenever this character makes you feel bad for him, he will always make you pay for it. Over and over again, he will make you pay for it, where you just like, I can't fucking believe I did it again.
Like he tricked you almost.
He tricked you.
Yeah.
Again. And that, if that happens, that would make me really happy.
Yeah. Wow. It's really toying with an audience in a good way. Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. I like that. I can't wait to start my rewatch and think about all of this and go back from the beginning.
I can't wait to go back to Teen Issues Weekend to see if there was any overlap with the Dance of Addiction and how that may have actually informed quite a bit of my life.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're really bringing it back to Teen Issues Week. It's just, it's wonderful.
It was a big deal. It was ahead of its time. It seems so antiquated now, obviously, but like at the time, like it was a big deal. I think there was even there was like a panel that might have even gotten banned. Like,
it's
like
too radical.
Too radical. Like the state got involved or something like that, or maybe just like the community sort of writ large.
Like too liberal, maybe.
Like the panel was too liberal.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, Central Maine. Bet you didn't know we were.
I kind of didn't know that.
Yeah. No. Well, at least that little bit of Central Maine.
Good.
Did okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. Can you tell us what's next in terms of you're developing a show with HBO?
I am, yeah.
What can you tell us about it?
This show, it's a dark comedy.
It sounds pretty dark.
Yeah, it's a dark comedy about a guy who opens up his own assisted suicide small business. And the idea being that he's very good at that job. But he fucking sucks at everything else in his life.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the gist of it. And I'm writing that right now. I'm working with we're working with HBO, and there are some producers on it as well, Will Graham and Haley Riengo, who have been a part of the development process, and they're fantastic. And so that's sort of where that's going. So that's sort of what's happening right now. I'm just like, I sold it to HBO last fall. Sort of had our kickoff meeting right at the beginning of the year, and so I'm just in the process of writing it. Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah,
I mean, congratulations. It's really huge.
Thanks. It feels on the days that I'm not spiraling.
Sure.
Yeah, on the days that I'm not spiraling into anxiety about it, it's great.
Yeah,
I feel great about it.
And a lot of the advice we've heard on this podcast relates to like creating your own work.
Yeah.
Or if you're an actor, try writing. And is that something you recommend?
Honestly, I will say, like, my manager, when we first started working together, he was like, start writing. And I was like, whatever, I don't want to do that. Like, it's never been my thing. Like, I've written in the past, but I was like, I'm not a fucking writer.
Yeah.
And he was like, start now. And I did. And it was all terrible.
Sure,
Everything I wrote was fucking garbage.
Yeah, that's important.
That was 7 years ago. And that thing that happens when you do shit over and over again happened, which was everything kind of got slightly better, like a little bit better each time. And certainly I'm not good like writers that are writers that you think about.
Sure.
I'm not good like those guys are good, but it's gotten better, and I've gotten more confident in it, and and starting that then led to right now, which is this thing that I do feel very passionate about, that I think I will be successful in, that I think is really funny, and that I'm going to work very hard to get off the ground. Like, that's happening, and that is a direct result of writing the worst fucking bullshit you can imagine 7 years ago. There is a direct line to those things. And so, yeah, it sounds like dumb advice, but take it, and more and more and more, it seems like this thing of just like being an actor who goes from job to job is just not a thing that exists anymore, which sucks because it's way harder to have to do 5 things than it is to do one thing. To
wear the many hats. Yeah. But that's really good advice to hear, that you just got to know that it's not going to be good the moment you start
it's going to be fucking garbage. Yeah. Whoever's listening to this right now, go start writing, and that thing that you wrote, it's garbage. It sucks. And then a year from now, it might actually not be as bad.
There you go.
Yeah.
Amazing advice. That was fantastic. Tim, thank you for joining us.
No problem. This has been great.
Any parting words of wisdom you have for our listeners? I don't know if I should keep asking this parting words of wisdom question, because everyone reacts like, oh God, I have nothing. What am I going to say?
Oh yeah, man.
What do I say?
We're all just trying to keep our head above water.
Yeah. In general.
Yeah. Or I mean, I guess the parting words of advice are, this is what I always tell people. Your timeline of success is different than everybody else's, so do not judge your own success based on anybody else's. I know that's hard to do. I still do it. Trust me, I still do it. Try to keep that in mind. And also, everybody's trying to keep their head above water and all this shit. It's fucking awful 95% of the time. So enjoy the 5% of it that isn't absolutely awful.
Yeah. That's great.
That's great advice. That's really going to put a smile on the faces of the people that are listening.
I like that. Yeah, it's just the right amount of optimism, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a 5% optimistic person.
Yeah, same. Yeah. The percentage has gotten smaller and smaller over
way smaller. You have met me 10 years ago, I would have been good for a 15%.
Exactly.
1.5, not 5.0. Are you fucking crazy?
No. Don't be crazy.
Don't be crazy.
In the Envelope, an awards podcast, is recorded at Lotus Productions, Hyperbolic Audio, and Big Yellow Duck in New York City, and Soundbox LA, Mark Grouse Studios, and Buzzies in Los Angeles. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, tweet us at In the Envelope, leave a review. We want to hear from you. Visit Backstage.com for more content and resources for working artists, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage with a free trial by using the code ENVELOPE at checkout. Thanks, as always, to podcast producer Wiz, Jamie Muffett. You can follow him on Twitter at JamieMusicNYC. You can follow me, Jack Smart, on Twitter at JackSmartWrites. Thank you to the team at Backstage, the most trusted name in casting: Peter Rappaport, Mark Stinson, Samantha Sherlock, Francis Ramos, Lauren Rout, Caitlin Watkins, Rawaan Alkhatib, and especially should-be Oscar nominee Kasey Howe. Thanks for listening. The wild tangents, we welcome them. That was perfect. That is exactly what the more about the cake plates, the better.
I really did see like a Craigslist. We went to, I don't know where, maybe we're at like a big,
did you see the same item?
Or something? And I was like, fucking cake being sold for $400? And it was like Annie's grandmother's or something.
Yeah, and you never know.
Put cupcakes on it.